Hello folks, Y Guy here again. This video is called The Y Guy and Eternity. Welcome to my home on this beautiful July afternoon. And I have a couple hummingbird feeders within just a few feet of this camera lens. And yellow jackets have been flying around here. That's welcome to July as well. The Y Guy and Eternity. Before I get into it, there's a book I wrote and got published, had published a few years ago, and I'm not trying to promote this book. If anything, I want to do the opposite, frankly. This book was titled years ago, Eternal Security Factor Fiction, and there's a picture of a younger Y Guy back there, and you know, this book is bogus. And the reason I say that, and the reason I would never promote it, is because I consider it bogus now. I've outgrown this book, and the reason why is because it's based upon traditions of men, doctrines of men, and Bibles that were translated from the Latin Vulgate. And for an example, just the title, Eternal Security, that is a doctrine of men. That terminology is nowhere within Scripture. Losing your salvation, or the opposite of this, or whatever. A doctrine of men, again, the terminology can be found nowhere in the Bible. Once saved, always saved, doctrine of men. Folks, we can go in circles chasing rabbit trails with religious terminologies and traditions and doctrines of men. And I'm glad I'm free from that. I've been set free from that, and I'd like to encourage any of my viewers to also consider seeking to be set free from these things. Now, as far as this video is concerned, the Y Guy and Eternity, let me give a couple analogies where I'm going to go with this, and they're used in law enforcement. Years ago, in my youth, I was a ranch hand, actually the only ranch hand. I lived on this ranch in Colorado, where I took care of Egyptian and Polish Arabian horses, 40 head of them actually, a lot of work. And around the dinner table, this ranch was owned by a deputy district attorney for Denver. And around the dinner table, we would discuss the cases. Because this district attorney wanted to get a different perspective, a young man's perspective who wasn't involved with the processes that always took place within a courtroom. And it really helped this district attorney, actually. Well, I learned an awful lot about the law and the judicial system in those couple of years, quite a bit. And I was going to go into law enforcement myself as well. So I learned an awful lot about how peace officers do their job as well. Well, one of the tools, yellow jackets, one of the tools of the trade, both a counselor as well as a district attorney in cross-examination in any courtroom, is to use the lack of consistency. Because with a lack of consistency from a testimony or a statement, if that can be exposed, then the jury would look at that, and either, you know, that would be a doubt in their mind, a reasonable doubt possibly, and maybe the counselor would win the case, and it'd be a hung trial or a dismissal. And so this is how it's used as a tool. Also, law enforcement would use inconsistencies as a tool. Have you ever wondered why in an interrogation, why peace officers, detectives would ask the same questions over and over and over again, or maybe get their partner to come in and ask the exact same questions, frustrating the perp? Well, there's a reason behind that, because if your statement or your testimony is inconsistent, the odds are you are lying. That is the way they view this, all right? Now, how does this apply to the Y Guy and Eternity? Well, there's a lack of consistency when it comes to the word eternity, eternal, everlasting, forevermore, whatever. And let me shed some doubt about this, okay? Because I don't know about you as my viewers, but I thought eternity meant time without end. Does it really? Does it really mean that? Okay? Now think about this. Out of 199 times, okay, that King James was translated from the Latin Vulgate, out of 199 times, the Greek word that was used for eternity, eternal, everlasting, forevermore, those kind of things, were aeon and aeonian. Okay? And there's also a form of aeonus as well, but aeon and aeonian was used most often, every 199 times. Now, out of that 199 times that the Latins came across that Greek words, those two Greek words, out of 199 times, I keep saying this over and over again so you can get this, all right, 152 of those times they translated it into eternal, eternity, everlasting, forevermore. Did you get that? Out of 199 times, 152 of those times is when they translated into eternal, eternity, and what have you. Why not 199 times? See, somebody is lying. Okay? Now, as a peace officer, I'm coming from that perspective. Now, what happened? The question I'm asking is, what happened to those other 47 times? There's no consistency here, folks. It should be 199. Period. Now, let's look at a couple of them. Two of those times, okay, out of the 47 that it was not translated eternal, it was translated as ages. And I hate to say this, but that's the only two times it was translated correctly. Out of 199 times, it was actually translated correctly. And I'll explain why here in a minute. One time, it was translated as course, C-O-U-R-S-E. 43 times, it was translated as world. Now, wait a minute. I thought eternity meant time without end, not world. I thought eternity meant time without end, not course, not ages. Ages means a segment of time. Do you see the lack of consistency? One of those times it was translated as never. Now, here's some examples I want to share with you out of the King James. And we're gonna apply the consistency that the Latin Vulgate, or I should say the King James, via the Latin Vulgate, did not apply. Now, Ephesians 2:7, it says, in the ages, this is the time where they did it correctly, in the ages to come he might show the exceeding riches of his grace. It says in the ages, but let's be consistent. Let's say 153 times it was translated instead of 152. And let's make this eternity. In that in the eternities to come he might show the exceeding riches of his grace. You see, they didn't use the word eternity. They weren't consistent there because it wouldn't make sense. Okay? Now, how about Colossians 1:26, the mystery which hath been hidden from the ages and from the generations. Let's be consistent now. Let's use the Latin translation and be consistent. The mystery which hath been hid from eternities and from generations. Again, it wouldn't make any sense. Here's a couple more. Matthew 13:22, where the word aeon is supposed to be used, and which they translated eternity or eternal 152 times, but this time they decided not to. One of these 47 times it came out, the care of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word. Let's be consistent. The care of this eternity and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word. How about 1 Timothy 6:17? Charge them that are rich in this world. Would it make sense to be consistent here and say, charge them that are rich in this eternity? Do you see the problem we're having here, folks? Let's just get a couple more. John 11:26. Oh, there's many more than this, by the way. John 11:26. And whosoever liveth, this one is the most fascinating one out of all of them. You'll see. You'll get what I'm getting at. This one blew my mind. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me, Jesus speaking, shall never die. There's that word never. It's aeon, folks. Aeon. Why was it never? Why did they translate it eternal? Well, let's be consistent and translate it eternal. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall eternally die. Whoa. Okay. Galatians 1:4, that he might deliver us from this present evil world. Again, let's be consistent, that he might deliver us from this present evil eternity. Now, here's some other questions that arise when it comes to eternity. Is there a before an eternity? If eternity is without end, that probably means it's without beginning, so there can't be a before eternity. There must be. If we're going to be consistent, there has to be a before eternity, because 2 Timothy 1:9 says before times aeons, aeonians. Aeonians is translated 152 times as eternity. So you have to say before times eternities. There's one in Titus 1:2. It says the same thing. Also, 1 Corinthians 2:7 says before the aeons. Let's be consistent, before the eternities. Now, is there an end to eternity? Well, how can there be if eternity is time without end? That means there is no end, but there must be if we're going to be consistent. Hope you're catching this, folks. Matthew 13:39, the conclusions of the aeons, or, let's be consistent, the conclusion of the eternities. Matthew 24:3 says the exact same thing, the conclusion of the eternities, or aeons. 1 Corinthians 10:11, the consummations of the aeons, or the consummations, or the end of the eternities. Hebrews 9:26, at the conclusion means end, okay? At the conclusion of the aeons, but let's be consistent, my ancient Latin friends, at the conclusion of the eternities. And of course, this brings us to the last question, is how many eternities are there? I thought there was only one eternity, according to most people who think about eternity. But apparently, if there's got to be more than one eternity, because if it's plural, like the conclusion of the aeons, the conclusion of the eternities, the consummations of the eternities, the conclusion of the eternities again, Ephesians 2:7, the oncoming aeons, it says, is the correct Greek translation. How about the oncoming eternities, plural? And the last one, Colossians 1:26, concealed from the aeons, concealed from the eternities. Well, folks, the correct translation, see, none of these make sense. 47 times it makes no sense to be consistent. However, out of the 152 times they translated eternal, in your mind's eye, you think, well, those all make sense. They all, to be consistent, they all have to make sense, all 199 of them, or else the translation is bogus. It's an error. Well, 2 of those times it was correct. But what about the 197 times? If you apply those 2 times it was translated correctly, this is so cool. If you were to take the 2 times where it says ages, or ages to come, or age to age, if you were to, every time, my viewers, every time you read these, the word eternal, everlasting, forevermore, just in your mind's eye, every time you come across that, translate it to age, or ages to come. And you know what? All 199 times will make complete sense. Consistency. It is so cool. Now, think for yourself, folks, okay? As a peace officer, I would approach you and say some traditions promote inconsistency. Or I should say, as a district attorney, I would bring that up to you. And as a peace officer, I would say some traditions are lying to you. Okay, and the 2 biggest, when you marry 2 lying traditions together, the tradition of a mistranslated word eternal and the tradition of a mistranslated word hell, and put them together and come up with eternal hell, oh boy, is there a lack of consistency there. Okay? And what's so fascinating is that the majority of the Christian religion, majority of Christians that are involved, that religion promotes, and people agree of an eternal hell, and yet you can't find those 2 words together anywhere in the Bible. Well, folks, bless you. Bless you, and I mean that sincerely.